cynical millionaire convinced everyone had a price, set a cruel trap by leaving his safe wide open for his new maid. But what she did next didn't just surprise him, it shattered his entire reality and completely broke the man he thought he was. The silence in the Ashworth mansion was a currency all its own. It was a heavy, opulent silence, woven from the threads of old money and deep-seated loneliness. It lived in the cavernous marble hallways, clung to the velvet draperies, and was measured by the soft, relentless ticking of a centuries-old grandfather clock in the main hall. And tonight, in the heart of that silence, in the master's private study, a trap was set. The door to the walk-in safe, a fortress of hardened steel and complex tumblers, stood wide open. If you believe that a single act of integrity can be more powerful than all the money in the world, do us a favor and subscribe to our channel for more stories that restore your faith in humanity. And let us know in the comments, what is the one quality you value most in another person? Inside the vault, the spectacle was obscene. Stacks of $100 bills, bound in crisp paper bands, lay like bricks of pure, unadulterated temptation. Ropes of gold necklaces and diamond bracelets glittered beside them, catching the low light from the desk lamp and scattering miniature rainbows across the cold steel shelves. It was a dragon's hoard, a king's ransom, a life-altering fortune left open for the taking. Hidden just beyond the mahogany arch of the hallway, shrouded in shadows, Alexander Ashworth watched. He was a man twice over a millionaire, but emotionally he was bankrupt. His eyes, narrowed and sharp, were not filled with anger, but with a cold, clinical anticipation. He was a scientist observing an experiment, and he was certain of the outcome. He knew her schedule down to the minute. He knew she would pass through here. The maid, Camilla. He was testing her. He was testing his own bitter philosophy, a creed forged in the fires of 1,000 betrayals. That everyone, no matter how pure they seemed, had a breaking point. A price. He wanted to see her falter. He needed to see her falter to prove that his fortress of cynicism was built on the solid ground of truth, not on the shifting sands of his own broken heart. And yet, as he watched his housemaid enter the room and pause before the gaping maw of the open safe, he never could have imagined that what would unfold in the next few agonizing minutes would utterly unravel him, breaking open a heart he didn't even know he still possessed. The housemaid's name was Camilla. She was 32, slender and reserved, with deep, soulful brown eyes that held the weight of stories she never told, sorrows she never shared. She had been working in the sprawling Ashworth estate for just over 7 months. To most of the staff, and certainly to Alexander, she was a ghost in a simple gray uniform, a shadow that moved silently through the polished marble corridors, leaving everything immaculate in her wake. But Camilla's life outside these hallowed walls was anything but immaculate. She was a widow, her husband taken by a sudden illness 2 years prior. She was the mother of 2 young daughters, 7-year-old Sophia and 5-year-old Luna, whose bright, innocent smiles were the twin suns of her universe. And she was the sole caregiver for her own mother, who was locked in a quiet, losing battle with cancer in a crowded, underfunded public hospital. Camilla was a woman moving silently, relentlessly, through a storm of pain and fear. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, tying her dark hair back into a neat bun, slipping into her uniform, and beginning her tasks without a single word of complaint. Her paycheck from the Ashworth estate was the fragile thread holding her entire world together. Alexander Ashworth, the reclusive millionaire who had inherited his fortune but never earned a moment of peace, had spent his life building and protecting his empire. People had stolen from him, betrayed him, used him until he was hollowed out. His ex-wife had taken a fortune in the divorce, along with his trust and love. A former business partner had siphoned millions from their shared company, taking with him his faith and friendship. He had learned the hard way that loyalty was a commodity, and his wealth made him a target. And so he had built walls, impenetrable steel ones around his vault, and thicker, colder ones around his heart. When Camilla arrived, recommended by a trusted agency, there was something different about her. She didn't flatter him. She didn't ask personal questions. She never lingered in rooms longer than she had to. She was, by every record and background check he had secretly run on her, painfully, almost unnervingly, clean. It bothered Alexander. Her quiet, unwavering integrity felt almost threatening, too pure to be real. It was a dissonance he couldn't resolve, a single note of harmony in his symphony of suspicion. That's when he devised the test, the ultimate test. One Wednesday morning, just before Camilla was scheduled to dust the study, Alexander arranged the scene. He unlocked the vault, swung the heavy steel door wide open, and made sure the contents were dazzlingly, sickeningly visible. He then instructed his head of security, a stoic man named Peterson, to temporarily disable the motion sensors and the single camera in the hallway. "Sir, are you certain about this?" Peterson had asked, his face a mask of professional concern. "That's a significant exposure." "I am certain, Peterson," Alexander had replied, his voice cold and final. "No one will know this moment happened except for me. I need to know. I need to be sure." He wanted to see what Camilla would do when faced with the temptation that could solve every single one of her problems in an instant. The hospital bills, the daughter's futures, the constant threat of eviction, it could all vanish with one quick, desperate act. Would she falter? Would she take just a single bundle of cash? Or was she truly as unshakable as she appeared? He hid himself in the adjoining library, peering through a small gap in the ornate doorway, his heart pounding with a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. Camilla entered the room at exactly 8:42 a.m. She didn't notice the safe at first, her focus entirely on her task. She moved to the grand oak desk, her duster gliding over its polished surface. It wasn't until the morning sunlight streaming through the tall French windows hit the gleaming steel door and bounced a sharp glare across the floor that she saw it. She stopped mid-step, her duster frozen in her gloved hand. Her eyes, wide with shock, went from the gaping safe to the hallway, then back again. Nothing. Silence. Only the soft ticking of the clock. Her breath caught in her throat. She stood utterly still for a long, agonizing moment, staring at the open vault as if it were a mirage, an impossible vision of hope and damnation. From his hiding place, Alexander's heart hammered against his ribs. Here it comes, he thought, a bitter, triumphant sorrow rising in him. This is the moment. This is where the mask falls. He watched as she approached the safe, her steps slow, hesitant. She was drawn to it, a moth to a catastrophic flame. Her fingers, slender and trembling slightly, hovered just over the stacks of money. Alexander held his breath. He could almost feel the rough texture of the bills under her fingertips, the cold weight of the gold. But she touched nothing. Instead, in a gesture so unexpected it completely short-circuited Alexander's cynical brain, she reached for the clean, folded polishing rag tucked into her apron. She leaned forward, her face still a mask of shock, and softly, gently began wiping the dust from the safe's gleaming outer edge. She was careful, precise, her movements meticulous, ensuring she didn't smudge the steel or shift a single bundle inside. She didn't count the money. She didn't glance around greedily. She simply cleaned the trap he had set for her with the same quiet dignity she used on every other surface in his vast, empty mansion. Alexander felt a strange, unfamiliar pang in his chest. But the true heart-shattering moment was yet to come. After she finished cleaning the edge of the safe, Camilla did something else. She reached into the pocket of her simple uniform and pulled out a small, folded photograph, its corners creased and softened with time and countless touches. She glanced nervously towards the hallway once more, as if needing to be absolutely certain she was alone for this private, sacred ritual. She unfolded the picture and placed it gently on the shelf, right next to a formidable stack of $100 bills. From his vantage point, Alexander could just make out the image. It was a picture of two little girls, perhaps 7 and 5, grinning with missing teeth in front of a hospital bed. In the bed, an older woman, presumably their grandmother, lay smiling weakly, her face pale but her eyes full of love. Camilla stared at the photo, her expression a mixture of fierce love and profound, gut-wrenching pain. She whispered something so softly that even the hidden, hyper-focused Alexander couldn't hear. It looked like a prayer, a promise. Then, with a tenderness that seemed completely out of place in the cold, hard study, she picked up the photo again, brought it to her lips, and kissed the smiling faces of her daughters. She folded it carefully and placed it back into her pocket, close to her heart. And then she did the one thing that finally, irrevocably broke him. She reached into her other pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver coin. It was old, foreign, clearly not American currency. It looked worn, almost featureless from years of being held. She held it tightly in her palm for a moment, her eyes closing as if in silent prayer. Then she leaned into the vault one last time, and with a hand that did not tremble, she placed the single, worthless coin gently on top of the largest stack of money. A small, humble offering, a quiet blessing, a gesture not of taking, but of giving. With that, she took a small step back, her duty, whatever it was, now complete. She looked at the safe one last time, and then with a quiet strength that defied all of Alexander's bitter expectations, she gently pushed the heavy steel door until it swung shut with a soft, final click. Alexander stumbled back from the doorway, pressing his hand to his chest, a sudden, violent sob catching in his throat. He couldn't breathe. He wasn't sure what he had expected. A quick, desperate hand, a stolen bill, maybe even a moment of greedy, calculating hesitation. He had been prepared for that. He had been banking on it. But what he had just witnessed was something else entirely. It was reverence. It was pain. It was a love so fierce and a character so pure that it had reached into his fortified, cynical heart and ripped it wide open. He turned and fled down the hallway before she could exit the study and see the silent, streaming tears carving paths down the face of the man who had tried to trap her. That evening, Alexander couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, the safe now locked, but the image of it and of her was burned into his mind. He kept replaying the moment over and over. The photograph, the quiet, desperate kiss, the safe, untouched, and the coin. That single, tarnished coin that now sat on his desk, a searing testament to his own spiritual poverty. He had a vault full of treasure, but this woman, who had nothing, had just given him the only thing of value she possessed. He realized he had not been testing her. He had been testing the world, testing the very concept of human goodness, hoping it would fail so he could remain comfortably numb in his gilded cage of misery. And he had been proven devastatingly, beautifully wrong. He realized he had judged everyone through the cracked, distorted lens of his own past wounds, and in doing so, had nearly lost sight of the rare, quiet, profound goodness standing right under his own roof. The next morning, Camilla arrived to find a thick envelope on the kitchen counter, addressed to her in Alexander's neat, heavy handwriting. Her heart sank. She was certain she was being fired, though she couldn't imagine why. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was not a letter of termination. It was a multi-page document. The first page was a simple, handwritten note. Camilla, you passed a test yesterday that I was a fool to ever set. I have spent my life believing that integrity had a price, and you showed me that it is, in fact, priceless. You have a vault inside you richer than any I could ever build. Your quiet act of dignity didn't just close a safe door. It opened my eyes. Your daughters and your mother deserve a life without fear, a life of peace and security. You have given me a piece of my own peace back, a gift I thought was lost forever. Please accept what is in this folder. It is not a reward. It is not charity. It is a thank you from a man who desperately needed to be reminded that goodness still exists in this world. Sincerely, Alexander Ashworth. Behind the letter were several other documents. A cashier's check made out to her for an amount that made her drop into the nearest chair, stunned. A deed to a small, charming house in a safe, quiet neighborhood with excellent schools. A brochure for the country's leading oncology center, with a letter confirming that a private suite and a full treatment plan had been arranged and paid for in her mother's name. And finally, a formal job offer, not as a maid, but as the new head of domestic operations for the Ashworth estate. A managerial position with full benefits, a six-figure salary, and a flexible schedule that would allow her to care for her family. Tears streamed silently down Camilla's face. Her hands trembled as she folded the letter to her chest, the paper absorbing her tears. In that single, overwhelming moment, she felt the crushing weight she had carried for years, the constant, grinding fear, lift from her shoulders. Her mother's treatment, her daughter's futures, the threat of eviction. It could all vanish. And not because she had begged or schemed or stolen, but because she had chosen to do the right thing when she thought no one in the world was watching. That weekend, Alexander visited her family in their cramped apartment for the first time. He didn't come as an employer, but as a guest. He sat at their small wooden table, was charmed by Sophia and Luna, and spoke with Camilla's mother with a gentle kindness that was entirely genuine. He had brought not just documents, but a future. He had learned the hard way that sometimes the truest tests in life are not the ones we set for others, but the ones that reveal the truth about ourselves. He had learned that the richest people are not those with the fullest safes, but those who live in truth, even when no one is watching. And he had learned from the quiet maid who had nothing that the greatest treasures in the world are not made of gold or diamonds, but of integrity, dignity, and the quiet, unshakable power of a good heart. If this story of transformation, integrity, and the quiet power of the human spirit touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We are dedicated to telling stories that reveal the profound beauty of humanity. And before you go, drop a comment below. What do you think is the true measure of a person's wealth?